All right, let's get right into one of the biggest, most chilling questions of modern history. How did the Nazis take a democracy and twist it into a total dictatorship in just a few short years? It wasn't just brute force. It was this sinister and, frankly, clever mix of legal maneuvering, pure terror, and some incredibly sophisticated persuasion. We're going to break down exactly how they pulled it off.
So yeah, that's the central puzzle, right? How on earth do you completely dismantle a republic and build a one-party state in under 2 years? I mean, it sounds pretty much impossible. But it happened. And honestly, if you can get your head around just how fast this all went down, you're well on your way to understanding the entire Nazi era.
Okay, so let's dive in. The first piece of the puzzle, surprisingly, isn't about violent street battles. It's what some have called a legal revolution. Basically, the Nazis used the law itself as a weapon to destroy democracy from the inside out.
I mean, just look at this timeline. The speed is absolutely staggering. It kicks off in February 33 with the Reichstag fire, the perfect excuse to just scrap civil liberties. 1 month later, bam, the Enabling Act. Suddenly Hitler can pass whatever laws he wants. By July, every other political party is just gone, banned. A year after that, he crushes his own internal rivals in the Night of the Long Knives. And then, when President Hindenburg dies in August 1934, Hitler becomes the undisputed Führer. Game over. It was an 18-month political blitzkrieg.
This right here, this was the knockout blow. The Enabling Act was basically the death certificate for German democracy. By intimidating the Reichstag into voting itself out of existence, Hitler gave his dictatorship this veneer of legality. From this moment on, he didn't have to break the law. Why would he? He was the law.
So once he had that absolute power, how did he keep it? Well, he used a two-pronged strategy, a classic carrot and stick approach. On one hand, you've got the stick, fear. We're talking the SS, the Gestapo, the camps, the whole terror apparatus. But on the other hand, you've got the carrot, persuasion, propaganda, these incredible spectacles and rallies, the promise of a unified national community. These two pillars, they propped up the whole regime.
Let's start with the stick. This was all about building a police state so completely terrifying that for most people, the very idea of opposition just became unthinkable.
And this was the machinery that made it all work. You had the SS, Hitler's elite black-shirted fanatics who ran the concentration camps. You had their intelligence wing, the SD, whose whole job was to spy on everyone. And of course, the infamous Gestapo, the secret police. They could show up at your door in the middle of the night and you just disappear. No trial, no questions.
And here's the truly crucial part. The Gestapo, as an organization, was actually pretty small. Its real power came from the myth that it was everywhere, that its agents were on every street corner. When people believe they're always being watched, what happens? They start to police themselves. They even start informing on their own neighbors. The fear of being watched became just as powerful as the watching itself. But, terror alone is never enough to run a country. You need people to actually buy into the system, or at least not actively fight it. And that brings us to the second pillar, this massive, sophisticated effort to win hearts and minds. Now, Nazi propaganda, run by Joseph Goebbels, was anything but clumsy. It was incredibly strategic. Each method was tailored to a specific audience. For the German family at home, cheap radios were mass-produced to pump Nazi ideology right into their living rooms. For the German people as a whole, you had these giant, spectacular rallies to create this overwhelming feeling of power and unity. And for the rest of the world, the 1936 Berlin Olympics was a PR masterpiece designed to show off a modern, powerful, and totally civilized Germany.
And here's the playbook, straight from the man himself. What's Goebbels saying? It's simple, really. Don't overcomplicate it. Just pick a few simple messages, like Hitler is Germany's savior, or blaming specific groups for all of the country's problems, and then hammer them home. Repeat them over and over and over, through every newspaper, every radio, every movie, until people just accept them as the truth. It's a cynical formula, but it works.
The Nazis also knew they had to get control over other powerful forces in society, especially the churches. So with the Catholic Church, Hitler made a deal, the Concordat. He basically said, "We'll leave you alone if you promise to stay out of politics." It was a clever way to neutralize a potential threat. For the Protestants, they went even further. They created their own official Reich Church, which basically fused Nazi ideas with Christian symbols. They even promoted a version of Christianity where Jesus was reimagined to fit Nazi ideals.
Now, it's really important to remember that not everyone was a goose-stepping Nazi. The reality on the ground was way more complicated. Even with all the risks, some people resisted, and looking at that opposition is crucial for real, top-level understanding of this period.
And some of the most fascinating opposition came from young people. They weren't trying to overthrow the government, but they just refused to conform. You had groups like the Edelweiss Pirates, mostly working-class kids who would beat up Hitler Youth patrols. That was a kind of physical defiance. Then you had the swing youth, more middle class, and their rebellion was cultural. They listened to forbidden American jazz music and dressed differently. Both were incredibly brave acts of nonconformity.
And it wasn't just kids. Even within the churches the Nazis tried so hard to control, you had figures like Pastor Martin Niemöller. He refused to go along with the official Reich Church and started his own alternative for Protestants. He became a leading voice of opposition, and he paid a heavy price for it, spending 7 years in concentration camps. His story is a powerful reminder that resistance, however dangerous, did exist.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. If you were going to explain how this all happened, how would you structure it? How do you connect all these different pieces of the puzzle?
Well, here's a solid plan. First, you start with the takeover. The Enabling Act is the foundation for everything. That's step one. Then, you analyze the two pillars. Talk about fear, the SS, the Gestapo, and how that created a climate of terror. Next, analyze persuasion. Goebbels and his propaganda machine, building this image of unity. But here's the key, the most important part. You have to explain how they worked together. Fear silenced the critics, which made the propaganda seem way more convincing, and the propaganda made anyone who was afraid feel totally isolated. They weren't two separate strategies, they were a vicious cycle of control. So I'll leave you with one last question to chew on, because it really gets right to the heart of the matter. At the end of the day, which do you think was the more effective weapon for the Nazis? Was it the concentration camp, or was it the radio? The very real physical threat of violence, or the constant persuasive whisper in everyone's ear? The stick or the carrot? Answering that for yourself is really the key to understanding how it all happened.